So next up, we have Sabilah Eboo Alwani. She's a doctoral candidate at Cambridge's Faculty of Education, and she's examining the effect of parental engagement on young children's learning and development during the COVID-19 crisis. She's particularly interested in listening to real parents talk about their attitudes and experiences of being their child's first teacher. Sabilah is also writing a book on early childhood development and the new science of parenting. So let's welcome Sabilah to the stage.
Hi, I'm Sabilah. It's great to join you this evening. Yesterday, I took a conference call with my 4-year-old on my lap. She ate snacks and she doodled on my notepad and she took every sticky note, leaf by leaf, off of the pack. And as adorable as my colleagues thought it wasn't the first time it's happened in the past week. This is the new normal for parents. But I'm joining you tonight not just as a parent of 2 children under 5. I'm also a doctoral researcher at Cambridge analyzing parenting in the pandemic and its impact on early learning. I've been looking at issues in education for the past 15 years and authored a book on parenting and its links to early childhood success. As you know, the biggest issue in education the world is hearing about is the learning crisis that has resulted from the COVID pandemic. But tonight, I want to focus on the learning crisis we're not talking about, the learning crisis in early childhood. There is a learning crisis for kids who are not in the school system because they're under 5. For these kids, there has been unprecedented chaos and uncertainty. This is because the learning of these children hasn't been protected or addressed by policies relating to education. We have what's being called a baby blind spot. Policymakers aren't seeing this problem and its extensive implications for the next generation. Before the pandemic, 98% of kids in the UK under 5 attended some form of nursery. But for the past year, kids under 5 have been in and out of nursery, which jeopardizes their readiness to start school at age 5. But the pandemic hasn't just taken away the continuity of nursery. It's taken away other critical learning experiences from our youngest children that are not being recognized. So much of our inner narratives are about our own constraints under lockdown that we haven't really considered the implications of the fact that children are also isolating. Children are also under lockdown. And inequalities for children are increasing. Some children have been stuck in apartments or high-rises in really dense urban neighborhoods and haven't been able to go outside to play. Other children have been isolated from their friends, their playmates, their grandparents. They've even been isolated from the playground. Even when I take mine, I have to tell them, keep away from the other children. Today, I had to explain to my 2-year-old that we couldn't hold the playground gate open for the next family that was coming because of COVID. And she was so confused. It's against everything that she's been taught. This loss of the tactile, the loss of interactions on an everyday basis, no slide, no swimming pool, no hugging friends, no learning how to walk on grass in the park. Imagine what the implications of this could be for these kids in 10 or 15 years. Do you know what my 4-year-old said to me when we went for a walk last Thursday? She said, "Mommy, I hold my breath when strangers walk by." The effects of these kinds of changes for young children will far outlast the 3 lockdowns. But we are not quantifying or even acknowledging the extent of this problem. And it's urgent because the period of early childhood is finite and these kids are losing time. When learning is compromised in this systematic way, we say it's a crisis. And exacerbating this crisis is a very serious compound factor: the nature of the pandemic itself and the stress that it's causing. A new report co-sponsored by the Parent Infant Foundation, published only last week, found that many young children are experiencing significant hidden harms in lockdown due to parental anxiety and stress. Now, I think all of us, wherever we are, would admit that this last year has been stressful in ways that are completely new. That's because this global pandemic is what we call a shock, a big life change, and shocks cause stress. The stress from shocks is particularly bad for young children who are under the age of 5. That's because their brains haven't finished developing. Research from neuroscience, economics, psychology, and child development all show that early childhood is a time-critical window for brain development, which is exactly why what kids learn and how they learn matters so much in the first few years of life. 0 to 5 is when it all stacks up and when every learning experience counts. The downside of this critical period of brain development happening early is it means that young children are very susceptible to life shocks and the resulting stress, which can be what research from Harvard's Center for the Developing Child calls toxic. That means it weakens children's brain architecture if that stress isn't addressed. Left to pick up the pieces of this crisis are the parents. Parents are being asked to do the impossible with no guidance and little knowledge. And by knowledge, I'm not talking about knowing how to use phonemes to teach reading to a 4-year-old. I'm talking about recent research from the Royal Foundation showing that 2 out of 3 parents didn't even know that the first 5 years of life were critical for learning. This is the crux of the crisis. We have a developmentally critical period of childhood. We have a global pandemic where toxic stress could be compromising healthy development. We've put parents in charge and we have given them zero support. This is a crisis we cannot afford to look away from. But here's what the research on early childhood indicates. Good parenting can buffer kids from toxic stress in early childhood. Good parenting has the power to improve children's outcomes across the board, how well a child performs in school, how emotionally secure they are, how good their mental health is, what their earning capacity will look like. All of these can be linked back to parenting in the early years. So the parenting that is happening now in every home will make the difference as to which kids are resilient to this crisis and which aren't. If there's one thing we want to be in a crisis, it's resilient. And if there's one thing we want our kids to be in a crisis, it's resilient. But that is not going to happen by itself. We need to participate in that process. Research on child resilience indicates that the biggest contributor is a stable, loving relationship with a parent. But it's hard to be a good parent right now. Not all parents have been resilient in this crisis. Some have had changes in job status, less access to liquidity, they've been shielding, some are key workers, many have lost loved ones. Other parents are facing structural disadvantages from their own childhoods, unequal socioeconomic status, a predisposition to poor mental health, bad parenting from their own childhood. All of these are stressful, all of these are stressors, and the factors are myriad. And we need to understand them better. But it's clear that parents too are in a crisis. So how do we go forward? There's one thing we do know. Despite whatever else parents are facing, play is one way all parents can help to stem this developmental crisis for kids under 5. Play can keep our kids learning because play is how kids learn. 4-year-olds don't learn by writing essays. 2-year-olds can't read textbooks. They learn by playing with peers or parents. And right now, there really haven't been consistent peers. Play between parents and children is linked to resilience, learning, and healthy development. All the things we need to get our kids back on track. When kids are small, a large part of doing good parenting is playing with your kids, actually being with them on their level and giving them quality attention and time and doing what's fun. It's not that play between parents and children is new. It's that no one realizes just how important this is right now. In the absence of so much else, when so many sources of learning have been cut off or compromised, parent-child play could be what saves us. And it doesn't have to be revolutionary stuff. I've done things like this, switching off the TV and forcing everyone out of the house in the rain to go and jump in muddy puddles and hunt for worms to investigate. I've organized treasure hunts around the house with mismatched pairs of socks where you have to go and find the matching one. We've measured ingredients for our dinner, we've built forts, we've made up rhyming songs, we've crafted with recyclables. We make a point to read a bedtime story to our kids, even on the nights when we would much rather get into the bed ourselves. All of this is ordinary, but the magic is seeing beyond its ordinariness to understand its transformative power for learning and development in the long run. It's important not to make the mistake of dismissing play as simple. The brain science behind play is profound and extensive. Dr. Ron Ferguson, MIT-trained education economist, took ideas like this and mapped out 5 categories for how parents can play with their babies and young children, things that can be done every day to buffer kids from stress and promote learning. Number 1, maximize love and manage stress. Number 2, talk, sing, and point. Number 3, count, group, and compare. Number 4, explore through movement. And number 5, read stories. If parents can be encouraged to participate with complete confidence in these 5 ways, we have a chance at closing some of the massive inequality gaps that are worsening every day. My research looks at how these dynamics play out. I'm looking at how parents are playing with their kids in the pandemic to see how that can help to foster child resilience and stem this early learning crisis. I'm looking at how structural inequalities could play out over the long term if they're not corrected. And what I am finding is that we have a systems level problem. There is a disconnect between research and policy. Research shows that parenting improves child resilience and learning, but policies and funding are being allocated solely to schools without consideration for helping parents to do a good job or helping our youngest children get what they need to keep learning. Let's project out 50 years from now. These kids will have grown up and they'll be raising their own kids. In fact, they'll be almost done. What are the effects going to be? We need to jump in now. The question is, can we do it in time? Can we find science-backed ways to help parents and young families take charge of their children's learning through the very simple and very possible means of play? If you are a parent and you're watching this and you have kids under 5, play with them every day. I know your own resilience is suffering. Mine is too. But making this choice can save their lives. It can save their development. Playing with our kids is the best thing we can do for them because it will diffuse the stress caused by this uncharted time and keep their brains developing healthily. It is not expendable right now. If you're not a parent to an under 5, but you have friends who are, talk to them. Let's spread this message together. I will tell you, parents are holding the future of this early learning crisis in their hands, and we need to empower them from every angle: research, policy, and practice. Whatever your connection is to this problem, you can be part of spreading this message. There is an early learning crisis that we have not recognized, but we can mitigate its toxic effects by promoting good parent-to-child play. Even though it's parents who are on the front line, everybody has a part to play to steer this next generation through the effects of this pandemic and to ensure that our youngest kids don't miss out on the chance to maximize their developmental potential. Thanks for having me tonight. It's been lovely to join you.